yeah, I did see that. Yeah, then it focuses on the text box.
Optus has 10.9 million subscribers as of 2019.
Okay, I'm going to try and capture this. Ready? Here we go. So as a learning exercise, I'm going to take you through what I did for Oscar. Oscar and I were working on this yesterday in class, and I got him to zip it up and send to me because I knew we were close to the answer, but I didn't quite get there. Unfortunately, I did get a little carried away and ended up finishing it for him because I just couldn't stand seeing it half done. So my apologies, Oscar, but what you'll learn here you can use to add to your website anyway. And I'm perfectly happy to go through anybody's actual code, talking to their API, and help you out working out how to present that on screen, because it's not easy, but it is easy, but when you don't know how to do it, there's a big blockage there. Okay, so I'll help you climb that wall. So Oscar's doing a livability rating thing based on a real estate API. So if we type in a city, it jumps down the page and that's the JSON he gets back. The JSON string is a little hard to figure out what's going on, so I did find out yesterday that what I can do is copy that JSON string, come back into VS Code, make a new blank document and paste that in. Now, that doesn't make it much easier to work with, but what I have got, if I go Command-Shift-P, I have downloaded a package or an extension called Beautify.json. And if I run Beautify.json and tell it I want 2 spaces as a tab instead of 4 spaces as a tab, it's personal preference, it actually lays out your JSON in a beautiful way. Pretty. So then it's easy to analyze. So this object has, the first property is links. Inside that, this links has a property called, I don't know how to pronounce that, queries, which could be like a curation of teleport users information on the web. I don't know, I haven't clicked on that because I'm not interested. Oscar was interested in the second property of this object called categories because he wants to display housing, cost of living, startups, and I just realised, Oscar, that I'm cutting out housing. I thought colour was a separate thing altogether, but it's actually a colour in each of these properties, so I'll fix that when I get to the code. But he wants to put these all in panels at the bottom so you can read them and put a little progress bar underneath them. That's easy because it gives you the name of the property. It gives you a score out of 10, so we can actually work out a percentage based on that if we wanted to. So they're actually easy to get to because they're all in an array. So whenever you're in an array, you've got multiple ways to sort of work out each of the elements of that array. I'm going to show you one today. There's another one called map that's worth investigating. We could use map to do what I've done. But I'll take you through what I did to get it working. And then down the bottom here, he's also got a summary and a teleport city score, which we assume is out of 100. So if that's the case, Oscar can add these bits in and use what I've shown you today to do that. All right, now for some reason my VS Code dumped all of my workspace. So as soon as I remember where I stored it, we'll get back in there, and there it is, SFTP. Oh, it's tech. Whoops. All right. In amongst this mess, in my public HTML, I have an Oscar folder. So the first thing is that Oscar's actually got all his JavaScript right here in his HTML or his PHP file. That's okay. I would personally be extracting all this stuff, putting it in something like main.js, JS, and importing that at the top, but this works. Oscar's put, and for those that are wanting to do something like a responsive search bar, Oscar's got exactly that. He has added an event listener, and the key he's listening to key presses. So every time you press a key inside this particular input box that he's got there, it's going to run this event listener, which is a what we call an anonymous function, because we just use the word function. And what he does then is say if that particular event is an enter, then we're going to do stuff. Now the stuff we're going to do, he has an invisible button that he clicks that goes and gets the input value, etc. It's a little convoluted doing that way. It's not quite as necessary to do it that way, but that's the way Oscar's got it done, so we're just going to leave it alone. And this is where we do our asynchronous stuff. So we've got this constant XML HTTP request. And this is the stuff we did the other day. And at the moment, all I'm doing is dumping the response text we get back into a container div. And that's why we're seeing the JSON like that. So to stop that from happening, what I've got here, and I've got some comments in there to help understand it. I'm just going to uncomment that. All right. First thing I do, instead of printing that text, I turn it into a JSON string proper, or it is a JSON string. I'm turning that JSON string into an actual object in JavaScript and storing that in something called details. So that's how we can get JSON straight into an actual object. Once we got it in an object, we can do things like, I just want to look at details.category. I've also got an empty string there. In the old way of JavaScript, we would have called that a var. But these days, we generally say let the string equal nothing. And then we're going to start adding to the string down here.
And categories is the name of
The property that he's interested in, out of that whole JSON string you saw before.
That's right.
So that's how we can access each of the properties by name. And I could have said categories outside of 0 would have got the first element in that array that's in categories. And you'll see that I do that down further. Next thing I wanted, because the raw figures you saw a moment ago had really big long decimal places. Is that the mantissa? That's the mantissa, isn't it, after the decimal place? Come on, math students. What I've done there is a very clever way to, and I don't take credit for it, but a very clever way to actually round to the nearest half. Am I right for mantissa? It's the part after the decimal place?
We came up with that and then we came up with significant.
Okay. So have a look at this line. This is really cool. I'm going to round. So the math object in JavaScript has a round function that simply rounds something up or down to the nearest whole number. So what I've done, I've completely jumped across a bit. Here's a for loop, but it's not like any for loop we've seen before. Instead of a counter, this for loop says, I'm going to take an individual element from details categories. So remember, details categories is an array. So every time through this for loop, key is going to be pointing to one of the chunks of information that Oscar wants to present. So when I say down here details.categories key dot score out of 10, it's going to get the number called score out of 10. And that's where I've done the if key is greater than 0. We don't actually need that. We need housing. So I'm going to get rid of that if statement altogether. I hate when it does that. One more. There we go. All right, so I round to the nearest 0.5. So the key that it actually gets out, sorry, I said it pointed to the object, it doesn't. It actually is just key 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's a count of the things in details categories because it's an array. So each time I'm going to get the score out of 10, which is that number with the really big mantissa, divide it by 0.5. Divide by 0.5, which is to double it. I'm then going to round that number and multiply it by 0.5 again, which gives me 1 decimal place to the nearest 5, which is really quite cool. All right, then each of those keys I'm going to go through and make a little div called panel. I'm going to put the details category key name, so that would be housing, cost of living, etc., etc., inside an H3. I'm going to simply put the number out of 10. Remember, that's a rounded number. So I'm going to put in the number out of 10 underneath. And then this progress is actually an HTML element. You can actually do a progress bar with an HTML element. You put the value, so it's 3.5, and it's out of 10. Max is 10. And it'll give you a nice, neat little progress bar. So when I go back now, and I refresh his page, jumps back to the top, I can type in Melbourne instead of a big JSON string. Helps if you save it. Siddeley. Instead of a big JSON string, it gives you a panel with each of those elements in it.
Oh, it's uneven.
So the first one was housing, that gave Sydney a 2 out of 10, and the progress bar is about 20% of the way across.
That's actually cool.
So that's really quite cool, a great way to look at your data, and all it is a call and a bit of intelligent. And the rest is all CSS, making it pretty.
Does it have the bar still there where you can still type in, or does that just disappear?
So what Oscar's done is he's done all this on one page, so I could scroll back up
Oh, okay.
and type in, the new one, which is a good idea. And we worked on that last week. Eventually, I would hope, there he goes, they all changed to Brisbane. So he might like to now put like a title at the top and put that synopsis that they've got, the summary, out of the API at the bottom, and the overall score. We assume it's out of 100. Might not be. It might be just a total of all these numbers.
Yeah.
If that's the case, it needs to be out of 170, because there's 17 of these.
I think it is out of just the one's just for 7.
Yeah, it is a percent. Yeah. The other thing is this, of course, because I've followed all the styling for this was done using our grid template. Our grid tutorial. So you'll notice that this behaves the same as the portfolio from there. So it jumps to 4 columns, jumps to 3 columns, jumps to 2, and if we go really small, there you go, stays on 2. So it's automatically responsive because all I did was copy what was in the portfolio into the CSS for it. Sound good? So that's quite a powerful visualization, done very, very simply. All right. I'll